I exposed my dad's affair at his wedding to his mistress. Now my entire family is divided and he's threatening to sue me. 1 year later, I got the biggest surprise of my life. I, 28F, have had a turbulent relationship with my dad, 55M, for as long as I can remember. Growing up, he was always distant and focused on his work as a high-powered corporate lawyer. My earliest memories are of him coming home late, briefcase in hand, barely acknowledging me before heading to his study. My mom, 53F, tried her best to compensate for his absence, but it was clear their marriage was strained. I remember one particular incident when I was about 8 years old. It was my school play, and I had a lead role. I'd been practicing for weeks, excited to show my parents. My mom was there in the front row, beaming with pride. But my dad's seat remained empty. He'd promised to come, but a last-minute work emergency came up. I cried myself to sleep that night, clutching the wilted flowers my mom had bought me. As I entered my teenage years, things only got worse. My dad started spending even more time away from home. He'd go on frequent business trips that seemed to multiply every month. When he was home, he was often irritable and quick to anger. I'd hear my parents arguing late at night, their voices carrying through the thin walls of our house. My mom grew increasingly depressed and withdrawn. I'd often find her crying in the kitchen, hastily wiping away tears when she saw me. I tried to comfort her, but felt helpless watching their relationship deteriorate. I started acting out at school, desperate for any kind of attention. My grades slipped, and I got into fights with other students. Things came to a head when I was 17. I had been sent home early from school for mouthing off to a teacher. As I walked into our house, I heard strange noises coming from upstairs. Thinking someone had broken in, I cautiously crept up the stairs. What I saw when I pushed open my parents' bedroom door shattered my world. There was my dad, in bed with a woman who was definitely not my mom. She looked young enough to be his daughter, with long blonde hair and a slim figure. I recognized her as his new secretary, the one he'd hired just a few months ago. They both scrambled to cover themselves when they saw me. I stood there in shock, unable to process what I was seeing. My dad jumped out of bed, hastily pulling on his pants. "Sweetie, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered. But it was exactly what it looked like. I turned and ran, tears blurring my vision. Later that evening, my dad cornered me in my room. He begged me not to tell my mom, saying it would destroy our family. He promised it was a one-time mistake, that it would never happen again. Like an idiot, I agreed to keep his secret. I was scared and confused, and part of me desperately wanted to believe him. For the next year, I carried the burden of knowing about my dad's affair. It ate away at me, poisoning every interaction with my parents. I grew resentful and angry, lashing out at both of them. My grades, which had already been slipping, plummeted further. I started staying out late, hanging out with a rough crowd. Anything to avoid being at home. My mom was worried sick about my behavior, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Every time she asked what was wrong, I'd snap at her or storm off. The guilt was overwhelming, but I felt trapped by my promise to my dad. When I turned 18, I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of the secret was crushing me. One night, after a particularly nasty fight with my dad, I broke down and told my mom everything. She was devastated, but also relieved to finally know the truth. Years of suspicion and gaslighting had taken their toll on her. My mom confronted my dad that same night. I could hear their shouting from my room, punctuated by the sound of things being thrown. To my surprise and disgust, instead of being remorseful, my dad blamed my mom for driving him to cheat because she was cold and unaffectionate. He even had the audacity to be angry at me for betraying his trust. The next few months were a blur of lawyers, mediation sessions, and tense family dinners. My mom filed for divorce, determined to finally stand up for herself. The proceedings were ugly, with my dad trying to manipulate and lowball my mom at every turn. He threatened to leave her with nothing if she didn't agree to his terms. I testified about the affair during one of the hearings, which helped my mom get a more favorable settlement. My dad was furious. After the hearing, he cornered me in the courthouse bathroom. "You're dead to me," he snarled. "You chose sides, and now you'll have to live with the consequences." For the next few years, I had very limited contact with my dad. He'd occasionally reach out on birthdays or holidays with a terse text message or impersonal gift card. It was clear he resented me for exposing his lies. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my relationship with my mom and working through my own issues. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the anxiety and trust issues stemming from my dad's betrayal. It was a slow process, but gradually I started to heal. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself despite my dad's absence. When I was 25, my dad suddenly started trying to reconnect. It coincided with a big promotion he'd received at his law firm. He'd send me expensive gifts and invite me on fancy vacations. At first, I was skeptical, but a small part of me hoped he'd genuinely changed. Against my better judgment, I cautiously allowed him back into my life. For a while, things seemed okay. My dad appeared remorseful about the past and made an effort to be more present. He even started coming to family gatherings again, though things were still tense with my mom. We'd have weekly dinners where he'd ask about my job and personal life. It felt like we were finally building the relationship I'd always wanted with him. Then last year, my dad dropped a bombshell. He announced he was getting remarried to his former secretary, the same woman he'd had an affair with. I was shocked and felt betrayed all over again. All the progress we'd made over the past few years seemed like a lie. When I confronted him, he dismissively said it was ancient history and that I needed to get over it. He couldn't understand why I was upset, saying that he and his new fiancée were in love and deserved to be happy. It was like he'd completely forgotten the pain he'd caused our family. The final straw came when my dad asked me to be a bridesmaid in the wedding. I flat out refused and told him I wouldn't be attending at all. He threw a fit, saying I was being selfish and immature. We had a huge blow-up fight where years of pent-up anger came pouring out. In a moment of rage, I told him I was going to expose his lies to everyone at the wedding. My dad panicked and offered me a large sum of money to keep quiet. I was disgusted that he thought he could buy my silence. I told him to shove his money and stormed out. For weeks leading up to the wedding, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to just stay home and cut my dad out of my life for good. But another part felt like I needed to finally stand up and tell the truth. The wedding was last weekend. Against my better judgment, I decided to go. Not as a guest, but to finally tell the truth. I waited until the ceremony started, then stood up and announced to everyone that the bride was the woman my dad had cheated on my mom with years ago. There was instant chaos. My dad's new in-laws looked horrified. Several guests walked out. My dad's face turned bright red as he yelled at me to leave. His bride burst into tears. I calmly laid out the whole sordid history for everyone to hear before walking out with my head held high. Since then, my phone has been blowing up. My dad left me a furious voicemail saying I'd ruined his life. His family members are split. Some are angry at me for causing a scene, while others have reached out to say they're glad I exposed the truth. My mom says she's proud of me for standing up for myself, but worries I may have gone too far. Part of me feels vindicated for finally speaking my truth. But another part wonders if I crossed a line. So Reddit, AIT for exposing my dad's affair at his wedding? Update 1. It's been about 6 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments. Reading them helped me feel less guilty about what I did. In the immediate aftermath of the wedding fiasco, things were pretty chaotic. My dad continued to blow up my phone with angry messages and voicemails. Some were pleading, others were threatening. In one particularly nasty message, he said he was cutting me out of his will and that I'd regret crossing him. I eventually blocked his number for my own peace of mind. His new wife also tried reaching out, claiming she wanted to clear the air. She sent me a long email trying to justify their relationship, saying they never meant to hurt anyone and that true love can't be denied. I found it manipulative and self-serving, so I ignored her attempts to contact me. About a month after the wedding, I was surprised to get a call from my dad's sister, my Aunt Karen. She and I had never been particularly close, as she'd always taken my dad's side in family disputes. Growing up, I remember her always defending my dad's absence at family events, saying he was just working hard to provide for us. But apparently, my revelation at the wedding had caused her to reevaluate a lot of things. Aunt Karen asked to meet up for coffee. When we did, she broke down crying and apologized for not believing me years ago when I first exposed the affair. Turns out my dad had convinced the whole family that I was a troubled teen, making up lies for attention. He'd painted himself as the long-suffering father dealing with a rebellious daughter. Karen admitted she'd had suspicions over the years, but chose to believe my dad's version of events. During our talk, Karen revealed some family history I never knew. Apparently my grandfather, Dad's father, had also been a serial cheater who eventually abandoned the family. Karen was only 10 when it happened, but she vividly remembered the pain and chaos it caused. She said she'd always worried my dad would follow in his footsteps, but desperately wanted to believe he was different. Learning the full truth made her realize she'd been in denial for years. Karen's apology and show of support meant a lot to me. She shared some old family photos and stories, helping me feel connected to a part of my history I'd been cut off from. She's been making an effort to be more involved in my life, which has been nice. We've started having regular Sunday brunches together. Karen even stood up to my dad when he tried to pressure her into taking his side. She told me about a heated phone call where she told him she was ashamed of his behavior and that he needed to take responsibility for his actions. It meant a lot to have someone from that side of the family in my corner. Unfortunately, not everyone in the family has been as understanding. My paternal grandparents are still firmly on Team Dad. They sent me a long, guilt-trippy letter about tearing the family apart and disrespecting your elders. They brought up how much my dad had provided for me financially over the years, as if that excused his behavior. I tossed the letter in the trash without responding. On a more positive note, my relationship with my mom has gotten even stronger through all this. She's been my rock, always there to listen and offer support. We've had a lot of deep conversations about the past, working through our shared trauma together. Mom even started dating again recently, which makes me happy to see. Her new boyfriend seems like a genuinely kind guy who treats her well. It's a stark contrast to how my dad behaved during their marriage. Seeing her smile and laugh again has been healing for both of us. As for my dad, he's still trying to do damage control. He sent out a mass email to friends and family with his side of the story, painting himself as the victim of my vicious lies. He claimed I was unstable and seeking attention, and that his relationship with his new wife only started after his divorce. A few people have fallen for it, but most seem to see through his BS. I've heard through the grapevine that his new marriage is already on shaky ground. Apparently, his wife is having trouble trusting him. Gee, I wonder why. They've been spotted having heated arguments in public, and rumors of more infidelity are swirling. Part of me feels a bit of schadenfreude, but mostly I just feel sad for everyone involved. Ultimately, I stand by my decision to expose the truth, even if the fallout has been messy. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I'm not carrying around this dark secret. I'm focusing on healing and moving forward with my life. Thank you again to everyone who offered advice and support. It really helped me get through a difficult time. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future and excited to see what the next chapter of my life holds. Update 2. It's been about a year since my original post, and I wanted to give one final update. A lot has changed in my life, mostly for the better. The biggest news is that I recently got engaged. My fiancé James has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole ordeal with my dad. We actually met at a support group for adult children of divorce. At first, we bonded over our shared experiences of family drama. But as we got to know each other better, we realized we had a lot more in common. James has helped me work through a lot of my trust issues and fears about relationships. He's patient and understanding, always willing to listen when I need to vent about family stuff. Seeing his healthy relationship with his own parents has been eye-opening for me. It's shown me what a loving family dynamic can look like. We're planning a small, intimate wedding next spring. Drama-free, I hope. I've decided not to invite my dad or his side of the family, with the exception of Aunt Karen. It wasn't an easy decision, but I feel it's necessary for my peace of mind. I don't want to spend my wedding day worried about potential confrontations or drama. In terms of family, things have mostly settled into a new normal. I'm still not speaking to my dad, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. He made a few more attempts to contact me over the past year, including showing up uninvited at my workplace. That incident really shook me up. He caused a scene in the lobby, yelling about how I'd ruined his life. My coworkers had to call security to escort him out. After that, I had to get a restraining order. It was a difficult decision, but I feel safer now. The day in court was tough, seeing my dad escorted in by bailiffs, hearing him plead with the judge. But I stood firm in my testimony, detailing his pattern of manipulation and boundary-crossing behavior. The judge granted the order, and I felt a sense of relief knowing I had legal protection. My relationship with my mom continues to be strong. She's been thriving in her new relationship and recently moved in with her boyfriend. Seeing her happy and treated with respect has been healing for both of us. She's rediscovered old hobbies and interests that she'd given up during her marriage to my dad. It's like watching her come back to life. Mom's boyfriend Tom has become like a father figure to me in many ways. He's always there with a dad joke or a word of encouragement when I need it. Recently, he asked for my blessing to propose to my mom. I was touched that he valued my opinion so much. Of course, I gave my enthusiastic approval. Aunt Karen has become like a second mother to me. We get together regularly for lunch or shopping trips. She's even offered to help with wedding planning, which I really appreciate. It's nice to have a connection to that side of the family without all the toxic baggage. Karen has been filling me in on some more family history that helps explain a lot about my dad's behavior. Apparently, my grandfather was not only a cheater, but also an alcoholic who could be verbally abusive. My dad grew up in a chaotic household, never sure when the next blow-up would come. It doesn't excuse his actions, but it does provide some context for his issues with intimacy and honesty. As for my dad's side of the family, it's a mixed bag. My grandparents eventually came around and apologized for their initial reaction. We're slowly rebuilding our relationship, though I'm still cautious. Some cousins and other relatives have reached out to reconnect as well. It's been nice to reestablish those connections, even if things aren't quite the same as before. I've heard through family gossip that my dad and his new wife separated a few months ago. Apparently, she caught him cheating again, this time with a client. They tried couples counseling for a while, but ultimately decided to divorce. I can't say I'm surprised, but I don't take any joy in it either. I just feel sorry for everyone involved, especially any kids that might be affected. There was a brief period where my dad tried to reach out again after his separation. He sent a long email apologizing for everything, saying the breakdown of his second marriage had made him realize his mistakes. Part of me was tempted to respond, to finally have the heart-to-heart I'd always wanted with him. But ultimately, I decided to maintain my boundaries. His pattern of behavior hasn't really changed, and I need to prioritize my own well-being. Overall, I'm in a much better place mentally and emotionally than I was a year ago. Therapy has helped me process a lot of my childhood trauma. I'm learning to set healthy boundaries and prioritize my own well-being. Looking back, I don't regret exposing the truth at the wedding. It was a catalyst for a lot of positive changes in my life, even if it was messy in the moment. I finally feel free from the burden of my dad's lies and manipulation. Thank you again to everyone who offered support and advice along the way. Your kindness helped me through some really dark times. I'm excited for this new chapter in my life and cautiously optimistic about the future.